Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Today we've got a few things to discuss, including a couple signings over with Montreal and Los Angeles, a few injury updates from around the NHL, and some trade rumors involving a huge one in Arizona, a significant trade rumor in Vancouver, and a couple in Detroit and the New York Rangers, with all that coming up right now. Hello everyone and welcome back to another video here. Today I'd like to kick things off with a couple of signings that happened over the past week. We'll start with the Montreal Canadiens, as the Montreal Canadiens have extended defenseman Jordan Harris on a 2-year contract extension that will have an average annual value of $1.4 million. Now, Harris is in his first season with Montreal Canadiens after finishing up his college career last year, and he has done quite well. I mean, he got his first taste of NHL action last year. He finished up his college career. He signed his entry-level contract. He looked like a good player. He was one of the better Montreal prospects in the defensive end. And he did alright toward the end of last year. I mean, the Canadiens were an awful team. They were banged up, and they didn't play very many good games down the stretch. That's why they had the best pick in the draft last year. But he did get a goal, his first career NHL goal, in 10 games last year, and showed that he could definitely be a good future regular NHL defenseman. And he showed it this year. And so far at this point, he has 3 goals and 13 points in 49 games for Montreal. He's looked fantastic. He's definitely bounced up and down the lineup depending on who's injured, as there have been a couple of injuries this year to guys like Edmondson, Matheson, Goalie. There's a couple of other guys who've been in and out of the lineup. So Harris is a good key piece who's been able to bounce up and down the lineup. I think in time he's probably going to be a really good top 4 defenseman. For now, he's probably more of a third pair defenseman. I would say, well, he's still a little bit inexperienced in the NHL. Putting him in third pair defenseman is probably the best. But Harris seems to have a bright future. I mean, if he can continue to build off of this season, I think Harris will be an absolutely great addition for that Canadiens blue line. So I think the extension is really good. It's only $1.4 million, and it's only for the next 2 years. So I expect this to be a really good deal for both sides. If Harris can continue to do really well, definitely him, Goalie, Xhekaj, all in their first years, done fantastic on the Montreal Canadiens blue line. And I think in time, Harris can easily be a top 4 defenseman for Montreal. So I really do like this deal. I think the $1.4 million for him is pretty good. We saw sort of these similar deals with guys like Timothy Liljegren and Rasmus Sandin, where the Maple Leafs signed those 2 young players to short-term, low-money contracts, even though they seem to have bright futures. So I think this is sort of the same thing with Harris. He looks like he's going to have a really great future with Montreal, and I think that this extension is really good for both him and the Canadiens. So good to see the Canadiens get one of their younger defensemen signed up over the next 2 years. Over in Los Angeles, they've had a goaltending signing, as they have signed goaltender Phoenix Copley to a 1-year contract extension. They'll have an average annual value of $1.5 million. Now, we know the Kings don't really have good goaltending right now. That's probably their one weak point. Copley's actually been the best of the goalies who have played for the Kings this year. Copley split time between the AHL and NHL over the past few seasons. He was the backup for the Capitals, like 4 or 5 years ago. But since then, he's basically been more of an AHL forward. If you look at last year, he had an .878 save percentage and a 3.11 goals against average in 2 games with the Capitals last year at the NHL level, but actually did quite well at the AHL level, putting up a .913 save percentage and a 2.3 goals against average in 35 games. So he looked like he was a really good AHL goalie. He started the season in the AHL for the Kings as well, with the Kings going with a quick Peterson tandem, and also did really well again, putting up a .913 save percentage and a 2.48 goals against average in 11 games. But then Cal Peterson was placed on waivers and was sent down to the minors, and the Kings called up Copley because they knew he does have some NHL experience. And some people have said that Copley might have just salvaged the Kings season. If Peterson continued to play the way he did and Quick wasn't as good as he was last year, the Kings could be in a far worse position than they are right now in the standings. So I think Copley's done an amazing job to save the Kings in net. Copley so far played in 21 games for LA, putting up a .901 save percentage and a 2.77 goals against average. So he's done absolutely great for the Kings. I think this extension is great. I'm not sure exactly what the future holds for their goaltending situation. Some think maybe it's possible that Peterson plays well in the AHL and gets another opportunity in the NHL. There's also the possibility that Peterson winds up being traded in the offseason and maybe the Kings don't bring him back. But besides Peterson, they didn't really have anyone signed past this season. Quick's a pending UFA, Copley was a pending UFA. They didn't really have much good youth in the AHL. I mean, they had a couple of good players, but I'm not sure any who could really step into being a good NHL backup. So now they have Copley signed. They have their good backup goaltender for next year. I expect Copley to definitely earn the backup role next year. So Copley's definitely done great with the LA Kings, and I expect him to continue to do good, and this extension should definitely be good for both the Kings and Copley. For the Kings, they now have a good goalie who they can rely on as a backup, and now they just have to figure out their starting goaltender situation with Cal Peterson. So good to see the Kings take care of this business. I expect Copley to continue to do well for LA, and I expect this to be a really good signing for both sides. Next, over to the injury update part of the video. We'll start with the Colorado Avalanche, as the Avalanche have suffered some more injuries over the past little while, and are now going to have some players miss some time. Now, Cale Makar, who recently came back from an injury, is currently day-to-day right now with this injury, and he is going to miss some time. Pavel Francouz, one of the Avalanche's goaltenders, has suffered a lower body injury. He's going to be out for an unknown period of time. And Avs defenseman Erik Johnson has suffered a foot injury, and he's going to be out for an unknown period of time. So this is really bad news for the Avalanche. They were just starting to get healthier. Josh Manson seems to be nearing a return. Landeskog could probably still come back in the next couple of weeks. So it was looking like they were getting a lot more healthier, but this just doesn't help them at all. Francouz is a really good tandem goaltender. He did miss a little portion of the season about a month ago due to injury, so not good to see him out again. Once again, with Francouz out for an unknown period of time, it's really hard to decipher when he will be back. But we do know that they still have a really good goalie in Alexander Georgiev, so hopefully Georgiev can hold down the fort until Francouz gets back. And hopefully Francouz is only out for a couple of games, and it's not too long. For Makar, that's an absolutely big blow to the Avalanche. Makar is one of the better defensemen in the NHL, and the best defenseman on the Avalanche. So definitely hard to lose him again. He was only out for a short period of time a couple of weeks ago, but definitely not good to see the Avalanche lose Makar again. Now, his upper body injury is listed as only day-to-day, so he shouldn't be out for as long as possibly Francouz and Johnson are. So hopefully he returns in the near future, and he's only out for like a game or two. But definitely not good to see Makar go down with an injury again. And then for the other injury, also an unknown period of time, Erik Johnson's going to be out with his foot injury. So not really great. Johnson has definitely upped his game. He's definitely looked good due to injuries to guys like Manson, Girard, and Byram earlier in the year, and Makar on occasions. Johnson's actually played more of a top four role this year and looked pretty good. But it's not ideal to have him play top 4 minutes, but losing him to a foot injury is not going to be great. So that decor looks a lot more banged up right now with Makar and Johnson out. And Manson, although it does seem like he's going to return in the near future, he's still out right now, so that defense is really banged up. And the loss of Francouz will really hurt their goaltending. So hopefully the Avalanche still have enough firepower on the offensive side to make do for the time being with all these defensive injuries. But hopefully guys like Manson and Makar can get back in the near future, and Francouz and Johnson don't take too long to recover. As for the New Jersey Devils, they've had a couple of injuries over the past week, as Brendan Smith went down with an undisclosed injury and has missed a few games now due to that injury and is day-to-day. As for the more important one, Jack Hughes has suffered an upper body injury, and he's going to be out week to week. So the loss of Smith is not overly important for the Devils. I mean, he's a good third-pair defenseman, don't get me wrong, but Smith is more of a serviceable third-pair defenseman, and young guys like a Ball can sort of take over the role for the next game or two while he recovers. He's only out day-to-day, so it shouldn't take too long for him to recover. Plus, he's already missed a couple of games, so I wouldn't expect Smith to be out too much longer. The more important and concerning injury for the Devils would be that Jack Hughes is going to be out week to week. Hughes has had a phenomenal season. He's looked absolutely great. I'm pretty sure he's in the top 10 in the league in scoring, and he's one of the better goal scorers in the NHL this year. So Hughes has looked absolutely fantastic. It's just awful news to see him go down with an injury, and hopefully he can get back in the near future. Now, Hughes is a huge part of that Devils team, and losing him for any period of time is going to be awful for the Devils. So hopefully he gets back into game action in the near future. He's not out overly long. It is week to week, so he could be out for a week or two more. So hopefully it's not overly long for Hughes to get back, but definitely not good to see him go down with an injury. And hopefully Smith can also recover and be back in the next game or two. Next, with the Ottawa Senators, they've had a couple of injuries, one to their defenseman and one to a goaltender. Now, first was Jake Sanderson. He left the Sens game over the weekend due to an injury, and it has now been announced that he's going to be out about 2 weeks with upper body injury. So it's good news that he's not going to be out overly long. Not great that he's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. The Sens are not trending towards being a playoff team, but they still want to finish the season strong. So hopefully he can get back into game action in a couple of weeks, maybe sooner, depending on how his recovery goes. Sanderson's in a really good top four defenseman for the Sens this year. This is his first season, but he's definitely stepped into a top four role and ran with it. So definitely not good to lose Sanderson. And they'll have to make do with their defensive depth right now. And hopefully guys like Holden and Hamonic and Zaitsev can step up and play bigger roles while Sanderson is out. As for the other injury, it's really bad for the Sens, as they already have Cam Talbot injured right now. He should be returning in the next week, maybe 2 weeks for the Sens. But over the weekend, the Sens also lost Anton Forsberg, who was stretchered off the ice in the game over the weekend, and he's now going to be out indefinitely due to MCL injury in both of his knees. So that's not really great news for the Senators. I've seen some people that say it's probably going to be out for a few months, and given the fact we're already in mid-February, the season's only about another 2 months, so it's quite likely that Forsberg's season is now done. So awful news for Forsberg. He's done really well as the Sens started this year. He's definitely had more of a tandem role with Talbot, but Talbot's been out on occasions this year, so not good to see Forsberg go down with an injury. Hopefully he can recover and he's back and ready and healthy to play next year, but definitely just not something you want to see. And hopefully Forsberg can recover and still be a really good goaltender at next year for the Sens. So not good news for Forsberg, and hopefully Sanderson can recover from his injury in the near future. Both players have been placed on injury reserve, so I wouldn't also be surprised if Forsberg was placed on long-term injury reserve for the Sens. So bad news for Ottawa to see another guy go out for the season. Adding to their injury list is not great, and the season continues to be bad for the Senators. Over in St. Louis, they've had a few good injury updates, as Ryan O'Reilly and Pavel Buchnevich have both been activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action, while Scott Perunovich is on a conditioning stint and could be nearing a return to game action. Now, Buchnevich has missed the past couple of weeks due to an ankle injury, and O'Reilly's missed about a month and a half due to his foot injury, and both have returned to game action. It's really good to see these two get back into game action. With the loss of Tarasenko to the Rangers in that trade last week, the Blues' offensive group looked a little bit bleak, so to get Buchnevich back is absolutely great. Buchnevich is definitely part of the core that seems to be going forward. Guys like Buchnevich, Chychrun, and Thomas look to be the future of this Blues team. I know Buchnevich's contract is a little bit shorter than the other two, but still, I think Buchnevich is a really good piece for the Blues, and it's good to see him get back into game action. For O'Reilly, he's a really good top six center, but there's a lot of trade speculation, and a lot of people think that O'Reilly could be moved by the Blues before the trade deadline. So it's good to see him get it back. He'll probably need to show other teams that he's good, he's healthy, he's ready to go before the Blues make a trade. But it does seem like while O'Reilly's a really good piece of that Blues team and is their captain, his time with St. Louis is coming to a close. So good to see him get back into game action. Hopefully he can continue to remain healthy and show other teams that he's still a really good player for the Blues. As for Perunovich, he's on a conditioning stint in the AHL right now. He's missed the entirety of the season due to a shoulder injury, and he was supposed to take strides this year to be a good top four defenseman for the Blues, but he just hasn't been able to do that due to his injury. So to see him go on a conditioning stint would indicate he's nearing a return. If the conditioning stint goes well, maybe Perunovich is back within the next couple of weeks. That'd be really great for the Blues. I know that their top four is pretty good with guys like Krug, Falk, Parayko, but I think Perunovich could definitely help out that Blues decor, especially since he just got rid of Niko Mikkola. So good to see Perunovich getting closer to a return. Hopefully there's no setbacks and he can return the next week or two, but definitely good to see O'Reilly and Buchnevich get back into game action. And lastly here with the Anaheim Ducks, we talked about last week how Troy Terry went down with an injury. Well, that injury has been updated. He's now on IR with an upper body injury and is going to be out week to week. Not good for Terry. He's one of the Ducks leaders on the offensive group, so hopefully he can recover in the near future. He's not out too long. It is week to week, so it's a little bit concerning. But the Ducks aren't in a playoff push right now, so they'll probably just let Terry recover until he's healthy again and try not to speed him into game action. So I expect Terry to be back, maybe not soon, but in a couple of weeks. He shouldn't be out too long for the Ducks. As for the other injury, Anthony Stolarz went down with a lower body injury and is now day-to-day due to the injury. So not good news for the Ducks goaltending situation. They've had to use Ollie Eriksson-Ek as a backup, which isn't too bad. I mean, Gibson's been getting majority of the starts with Stolarz out, but it's not overly ideal. So hopefully Stolarz can get back into game action in the near future. He's only day-to-day right now, so he shouldn't be out for too much longer, but definitely not good to see him go down with the injury. So hopefully Stolarz can get back into game action, continue to be a good backup for the Ducks. As for Troy Terry, hopefully he gets back in the next week or two and continue to be a good top six forward for the Ducks. So hopefully these two can get back into game action in the near future. Now that's all the injury updates I want to talk about for today. Now we go over to the trade rumor part of the video. Now, there's been a lot of interesting trade rumors over the past week. Now we'll start with Jakob Chychrun. There have been a lot of news over Chychrun over the weekend and into the early parts of this week. So last week on Saturday, a lot of people saw that the Arizona Coyotes announced on Twitter that they were going to scratch Jakob Chychrun due to trade-related reasons. Now that I've got everyone trying to figure out, is Chychrun getting traded? He wasn't out due to precautionary reasons. He was out due to trade-related reasons. So that got everyone to thinking that a Chychrun trade was imminent and it was going to happen at any point on Saturday. And then there were a lot of conflicting reports about what's happening, what's going on. On the 32 Thoughts segment on Hockey Night in Canada, Jeff Merrick said that the Leafs and Oilers were not in on him, that the Kings were pouring cold water on it for the time being, but that maybe the Kings weren't not in on it, but they were just trying to diffuse the situation given the fact that it was Dustin Brown night for the LA Kings, and they were hanging up his jersey, so they didn't really want anything to disrupt that. Some talk on Twitter that maybe other teams could be interested as well, but then there was a lot of talk late into Saturday, early into Sunday, that the Kings were seeming like the front runners for Chychrun. There were some reports that Brandon Clark might be in the trade for Chychrun, who is the Kings' top D prospect. There was also some talk that maybe it was taking a while because the Kings were trying to also acquire Vejmelka in a Chychrun trade. So there was a lot of reports. But on the 32 Thoughts podcast recently, Elliot Friedman said that the Kings and Yotes did seem to have some sort of a trade lined up, and that was close enough that the Yotes sort of scratched Chychrun due to that trade being close. But he said that the Kings and Yotes needed to work out some contracts, and there was a contract that needed to be moved to make the trade work, and they just weren't able to do that. And since the contract has been moved, that trade has sort of cooled off a little bit. Not to say that Kings still won't make the trade for Chychrun, it's just not happening as of right now. So it definitely seems like this Chychrun thing is really going to be interesting to see. Freeman also did say that Clark, who is their top D prospect, and one of their top forward prospects in Quinton Byfield are not available in trades. And the Kings are not going to be trading either of those guys, so if you're an Arizona fan, it doesn't sound like Clark or Byfield would be included in a Chychrun trade. But there's definitely a lot of other young pieces out there for the Kings. And Freeman also said that due to the holdup with the LA Kings, and the fact that that trade is sort of cooled off a little bit for now, some other teams might have gone back into the sweepstakes for Chychrun. Not exactly sure what sort of teams those will be in. My best guess of the situation, this is just my opinion, but my guess is that the Yotes and the Kings were working on a trade really on Saturday night. They were trying to make a trade. Either at this point, my best guess for a possible trade would have been Chychrun to LA in exchange for, my best guess of what a trade package for the Kings would have been offering would have been LA's 2023 first round pick, two of either Akil Thomas, Alex Turcotte, or Samuel Fagemo. I would think that two of those two would have to be included in a deal, and then maybe another pick, like a second or third round pick, and maybe like the 2024 draft. And if some speculation was correct and they were trying to acquire Vejmelka, then maybe there was like a Chychrun and Vejmelka for maybe that trade package plus like maybe another second or a third and lower end prospect, something like that. But the Kings don't have much cap space to work with, so the Arizona Coyotes would have to take on some salary. So if there was a contract that needed to be moved that wasn't able to be moved, my guess would be one of three. It would either be Cal Peterson if there was a Vejmelka trade, because the Kings could definitely use Peterson to offset the contracts. It wouldn't be all of it. There would definitely have to be another player included, but I'm not exactly sure if Arizona would be open to acquiring Cal Peterson. Maybe that's why the trade got hold up. Maybe one of the defensemen in LA, either a Sean Walker or a Matt Roy. We have talked about how the Kings probably will move one of the right shot defensemen to acquire a left shot defenseman, but maybe the Arizona Coyotes aren't really interested in acquiring like a Matt Roy or a Sean Walker. So maybe that's the sort of contract that held up the deal. But one of the possibilities I think who could have followed up the deal would have been Alex Iafallo. I think the Kings have a lot of good offensive players on the forward group and a lot of good young players. Velarde's probably going to return in the next week or two from his injury. He's a good top 9 forward, and Iafallo's playing on the third line. And he's sort of fallen out of favor with LA over the past little while. I know he's still a really good, productive forward, but given the fact he has a $4 million cap hit for this year plus 2 more seasons, if LA were to trade him to Arizona for Chychrun, that would basically offset the cap. So I would not be surprised if the Kings wanted the Arizona Coyotes to take on Alex Iafallo, and the Arizona Coyotes didn't want to do that, so you need to try and find a way to make the cap work. But definitely, I think if there was a contract that held up the Chychrun deal, it was probably either one of Iafallo, a Roy Walker, or if they were to trade the goalies as well, the Cal Peterson. But definitely think that it's still very likely that Arizona does trade Chychrun to LA. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but I definitely do think that it's going to be something we have to keep our eye on over the next little while. Some teams who could possibly have gone back into the sweepstakes after LA sort of wasn't able to capitalize on the chance they got. You got Boston maybe. We know that Buffalo's been linked to them a little bit. Columbus has been linked to them a little bit. Could the St. Louis Blues have interest? There's definitely a couple of teams I think could be back in the Chychrun sweepstakes, but definitely seems like Arizona and LA were close maybe on a deal at some point on Saturday, but it seems like that sort of trickled off now, and Chychrun's still being scratched. It seems like he has played his final game in Arizona uniform, and his next game will be in a new uniform. Next, over with the Vancouver Canucks, there's a lot of talk now that Luke Schenn has sort of been drawing interest, and talks have picked up over the last week. Now, last week, Luke Schenn missed one game due to a injury. He was only out for one game. He was right back into game action, but it seemed like that injury scared. Teams are starting to call on him to try and make a trade sooner rather than later, so that there's no more injury possibilities for Schenn before he gets possibly traded. Schenn is a really good top 4 defenseman. He's on a cheap deal, and there seems to be some good interest in Schenn. I know that it sounds like, as of right now, that the Tampa Bay Lightning, who did seem to have interest earlier in the year, are out on Schenn right now, so it doesn't seem like the Bolts are going to be acquiring him. But Friedman did say that talks were picking up around Schenn over the past week on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and that Flames and Bruins still seem to be two interested parties in acquiring Schenn. And that the asking price I've seen some places is probably a 3rd round pick plus. So a 3rd round pick and maybe a decent level prospect would be my guess. So it definitely does sound like Schenn is probably going to be moved. Another thing to consider is that Schenn's wife is pregnant and she's due on the deadline. So they sort of want to get that situation also done for Schenn so that he can get into his new city in the near future rather than closer to the deadline. So it does sound like Schenn will probably be dealt before the deadline, and it does sound like it could happen sooner rather than later. So definitely going to be interesting to see over the next couple days and couple weeks if a Schenn trade does materialize. We'd like to know what you think. Does Schenn wind up getting traded? And if so, where does Schenn wind up? And then just a couple of quick notes here. On the 32 Thoughts segment on the Hockey Night in Canada, Friedman did say that Vitaly Kravtsov might be available for trade, and it could be possible that the Rangers do trade him before the trade line. There was a lot of trade speculation about a year and a half ago for Kravtsov. When he didn't get a top 9 role, he wouldn't report to the AHL and he went over to the KHL. A lot of people thought that he needed a fresh start, but he wound up playing the entire season of the KHL, came back for this year. He's done okay, but he's been a healthy scratch a lot of times. Only had 3 goals and 6 points in 20 games this year, so he's only played in less than half of their games, so I think a fresh start is probably the best thing for Kravtsov. I mean, he was a former 10th overall pick, and he's only played in like 40 or 50 games so far in his career, so he hasn't been too productive either. He's only got like 10 points in his NHL career, so hopefully trade at the deadline at some point. Not exactly sure what the return would be for a guy like Kravtsov, maybe like another young player who's not doing too well, and he can be moved to a team where he can play a consistent top 9 role and maybe excel with a different team elsewhere. So keep an eye on Kravtsov. I'd like to know what you think. Where do you think Kravtsov would end up? And where do you think the best fit would be for him if he were to be traded before the deadline? And lastly, here with Tyler Bertuzzi, there's been some talk over the past little while that Tyler Bertuzzi could be had for a trade. Now, it does seem that the Red Wings are asking for quite a bit for Bertuzzi. My guess would probably be either like a first-round pick and a decent level prospect, or maybe like a second-round pick and higher level prospect, would be my guess at least. But Bertuzzi, he's had a lot of injuries this year, only getting 7 points in 20 games so far, whereas last year he had 30 goals and 62 points in 68 games and was almost a point per game player. So injuries have really derailed his season this year, and he's in a contract year as well. So it's definitely possible that he could still return to a 30-goal form in the not-too-distant future. He's still recovering from his injury. He's a little bit rusty with the Red Wings right now, but at least he's playing some games. But there's definitely been a lot of talk that possibly the Tampa Bay Lightning, if they can make the cap work, have some decent interest. The Edmonton Oilers, we know that they're looking for a more physical type top 9 forward. Bertuzzi fits that bill. And we know that the Stars are looking for someone to play with Tyler Seguin, and Bertuzzi would fit that bill as well in the top 6. So definitely looks like Bertuzzi is a very likely candidate to be moved before the trade deadline. I'm not sure if there will be some other teams who probably have interest, maybe like a Winnipeg Jets or Vegas Golden Knights if they were willing to pay the asking price. I definitely think Bertuzzi would have his fair share of interests. I'm not exactly sure if the Red Wings would probably try and bring Bertuzzi back. I mean, he's a good player, but I think the Red Wings have a few more younger guys who could probably step into a top 6 role. So I definitely think that it's possible that Bertuzzi is still a Red Wing past the deadline, but I think it's a lot more likely that he gets moved. And the Bolts, the Oilers, and the Stars seem to be teams who have significant interest in Bertuzzi. But I'd like to know what you think. Does Bertuzzi get dealt before the trade line? If so, which team do you think he goes to, and for what sort of a trade package? But that's all I'm going to talk about for today. Remember to like this video and subscribe. I also do a blog. I will leave a link to that in the description below. And I can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.